I got lost in Australia in the most ordinary way possible. Wrong turn, dead phone, no map, just me standing on a street corner in a suburb I didn't recognize, completely turned around. In the US, that moment flips a switch in your body instantly. Your whole system goes on alert. You tighten up. Your eyes start working differently, scanning faces and calculating distances. You plan exits even when there's nothing to exit from. You limit eye contact because engagement feels like risk. You make yourself smaller, less noticeable, less vulnerable. Standing there on that Australian street corner, I felt that instinct rise up like it always did, that familiar flood of adrenaline and defensive calculation. Then it just stalled, hung there in my chest with nowhere to go. People moved around me without any pressure or edge to their movement. No one stared at me like I was suspicious. No one rushed past like I was a problem they needed to avoid. No one sized me up. I was just a guy standing there looking confused, and that seemed completely fine to everyone. That pause, that absence of reaction felt genuinely strange to me, foreign. My body didn't know how to process it. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to prove my instincts right, but people just kept walking past me like being lost was the most normal thing in the world, like I wasn't a threat and they weren't threats either. I hesitated before asking for help, old programming running deep. Back home, asking strangers for anything invites risk and complication. You never know who you're dealing with. You never know what simple interaction might escalate into something else. You calculate whether being lost is worse than engaging with someone you don't know. Here in Australia, that hesitation felt completely unnecessary, but I didn't know that yet. I finally approached someone, this older guy walking his dog, and asked for directions to the train station. Before I even finished my sentence, another person stopped to listen, not to eavesdrop or insert themselves, just to help if they could. Then a third person joined without any sense of urgency or weirdness about it. No one questioned why three strangers were suddenly having a conversation on the sidewalk. They just started talking through my options with me, like time didn't matter, like they had nowhere more important to be than helping some lost American find his way. One guy pulled out his phone to check the map, another one explained which streets to avoid because of construction, the third one offered to walk me part of the way since he was heading in that direction anyway. The whole interaction lasted maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like stepping into a completely different reality, one where helping wasn't transactional or suspicious. It was just what people did.
No one questioned why I was lost or how I ended up there. No one warned me to be careful walking around alone. No one gave me that look that says you should know better. Phones came out without any suspicion, without anyone clutching them tight or angling screens away from me. Directions turned into genuine reassurance, not just information. "You'll be fine, mate. Straight shot for me. Can't miss it." Their tone stayed calm and steady the entire time, like there was nothing unusual about any of this, like community was just the default setting. My confusion, which had felt isolating and slightly embarrassing just moments before, became completely shared. They acted like my problem was their problem, not in a burdensome way, but in a way that said we're all in this together. That changed everything about how the moment felt. I went from being alone and vulnerable to being temporarily part of something larger, a stranger who these people decided to fold into their day without hesitation. They didn't need to know my story, didn't need to verify I deserved help, didn't need anything from me at all. The help was offered freely, generously, without strings attached. And when we parted ways, they smiled and waved and went back to their lives like they hadn't just completely shifted my understanding of how strangers can treat each other. Like it was nothing, like it was everything. What struck me most wasn't what happened, it was what didn't happen. No impatience in anyone's voice or body language, no judgment about me being unprepared or careless, no hidden agenda I had to watch for, no sense that this kindness would cost me something later. Help felt completely normal here, expected even, like it was woven into how people related to each other. Not exceptional, not remarkable, just baseline human decency operating the way it probably should everywhere, but doesn't. I realized, standing there, how deeply conditioned I was to expect distance from strangers, to assume people would rather not be bothered, to believe that everyone was just trying to get through their day without complications from people like me, that asking for help was an imposition I should avoid unless absolutely necessary. Australia challenged that entire worldview without any effort. These people weren't trying to prove anything or make a point. They weren't performing goodness for an audience. They were just being themselves. And themselves included stopping to help a lost stranger without thinking twice about it. That simplicity was what got me. The lack of performance, the absence of calculation. They helped because I needed help, and they could provide it. End of story. No deeper analysis required. And that made me realize how complex and exhausting my default assumptions had become back home. How much energy I spent protecting myself from people who probably weren't threats at all. After I found my way to the train station, I kept replaying that interaction in my head. Not because it was dramatic or life-changing in any obvious way, but because it was so unexpectedly gentle. That gentleness carried real weight. It wasn't soft or weak, it was solid, grounded. It showed me what trust looks like when it's operating in real time between complete strangers. Trust that wasn't earned through credentials or explanations. Trust that just existed as the starting point. These people trusted that I was who I appeared to be, someone who needed directions. I trusted that they wanted to help without ulterior motives. That mutual trust created space for a human moment to happen without all the usual defenses and performances. Nobody had to prove anything. We just existed together briefly and then moved on. That simplicity stayed with me for days afterward. I found myself thinking about it at random moments, comparing it to similar situations back home where the energy would have been completely different, where I would have been more guarded, where people would have been more hesitant, where the whole interaction would have felt transactional instead of generous. The contrast was sharp enough that I couldn't ignore it. Australia wasn't just different in policy or politics, it was different in how people treated each other in small, everyday moments that most people would forget immediately. But I couldn't forget it. It had shown me something I didn't know I was missing. I noticed how my body responded in the hours and days after that interaction. Something had shifted beneath the surface. I walked slower through the streets, took my time, looked around without that constant low-level scanning for potential threats. I paid actual attention to people instead of monitoring them. I saw their faces as faces, not as variables in some unconscious risk assessment I was always running in the background. One simple interaction had adjusted my baseline, recalibrated something fundamental in how I moved through public space. That surprised me more than getting lost had. I didn't expect a 5-minute conversation with strangers to have any lasting impact, but it did. It showed my nervous system that a different way was possible, that I didn't have to carry all that tension and vigilance everywhere I went, that people could be trusted as the default, not the exception. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched. I made eye contact with people on the train and smiled instead of looking away. Small things, tiny adjustments, but they added up to a completely different experience of being in the world. I felt lighter, more open, less defended. And all of that came from one moment of ordinary human kindness that probably meant nothing to the people who offered it, but meant everything to me. It was proof that the way I had been living wasn't the only way, that there were places where guard could come down without consequence. That day taught me something both simple and heavy, something I'm still processing months later. Kindness doesn't announce itself here in Australia. It doesn't come with fanfare or recognition. It just appears exactly when it's needed and disappears without asking for credit or gratitude. It's not performed for social media or to prove what a good person someone is. It's just built into how people operate, into the cultural fabric of daily life. And once you experience that, once you feel what it's like to receive help that comes with no strings attached, no judgment, no suspicion, everything changes. Getting lost stops feeling frightening. It starts feeling human, like a normal problem that normal people help each other solve. Not a vulnerability that predators might exploit, not a weakness you have to hide, just a temporary situation that will get resolved because people care enough to stop and help.
That shift in perspective is enormous. It changed how I see strangers, how I see public space, how I see myself moving through the world. I'm not a potential victim or a potential threat anymore. I'm just a person, and everyone else is just a person too. We're all just trying to figure things out, and sometimes we help each other do that. That's it. That's the whole thing. And it's so much better than the way I used to live. So much lighter, so much more connected, so much more human. I didn't know life could feel this way until it did.